Welcome.
Blessings.
All
Welcome.
right. So, welcome to Navigating Eternity. I'm Aust Neferka. This is my co-host, Danny, Gazi. I guess we'll start first and foremost. Thank you for coming. Welcome. If you're here with us live, please feel free to engage with us in the chat. You can ask questions, you can make your comments. So we love to get that engagement. If you're watching the replay or raw play, as we like to say, then you can go ahead and leave a comment if you'd like, and we'll get back to you. So without further ado, if it's your first time here, I guess we'll start with some light introductions. This is our second episode here on YouTube, but we've been doing this Navigating Eternity Ancient Astrology series on Instagram. So you can follow both of us on Instagram. All of the links are in the description. Tehuti Ma'at, which is our organization, has a overarching Instagram that covers the work that we do at Tehuti Ma'at Community Garden, our Organic Food for the People initiative. This venture that we're speaking on, or the platform that we're speaking on today, is Coins and Karis, which is our cooperative marketplace. It is a spiritual marketplace for spiritual goods and services, and you can book your astrology reading with Danny. You can book an oracle reading with myself, and spiritual consultations. So if you want any information about any of that, then you can just check out coinsandkaris.com. Again, the link is in the description. Today, we're going to be talking about the divinity in the details, because we have two dominant energies right now that are ruled by Mercury, which is the energy of Tehuti. So we're going to get into some of the ancient astrology. But first and foremost, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. Danny, can you please introduce yourself to our listening audience?
Peace, everyone. My name is Danielle Gazi. As Nef said, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I'm here to facilitate the return to oneness. I'm also a cosmologist. I love astrology. I love people. I love psychology and all of the teams. So I put it together in order for us to learn how to define ourselves and exist amongst each other.
So I just wanted to clarify the previous live streams that we've done, the previous episodes, because we've been touching on really fundamentals of astrology, really demystifying it, because I think a lot of people don't have respect for astrology. And that's one of the things I take very seriously. And I know Danny's very passionate about it as well, because there's a lot of misconceptions about astrology being limiting and kind of dogmatic in the way that it's interpreted, especially based on the linear approach of European astrology that most people are familiar with, right? The Greek zodiac, which most people are familiar with. So we'll use some of those terms to introduce you to the ancient African origins of the astrological signs and symbols and energy spheres that we usually use Greek and Roman words for. So that's going to be the baseline of what we're expressing today. So it's going to be very educational. We focus on having a practical approach because it's really not a mystery. The energy is here. It's all around us. It's within us. And our goal is to make you see and feel that connection and to truly move into embodying the energy. So we are also working on our Kemetic Zodiac course. So that'll be coming out soon. So it's an extension of Navigating Eternity, which is our course that you could find on Tehuti Ma'at Academy. So all of the links are in the description. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us about that. And then for those who don't know me, I'm Aust Neferka. I'm the mother of Tehuti Ma'at. I'm a healing artist. I am a revolutionary, a spiritual warrior. I am a sacred wisdom keeper of ancient Kemetic science, sacred science of our ancient African ancestors. So that is the foundation that we're going to be building on today. So I would love for Danny to kind of just go ahead and get us to take off with what is the energy that we're moving through right now. In astrology, we usually use the word transit. So the transits, you could think just like a train transiting, moving from space to space. So same thing happens throughout our solar system. Different energy spheres that we know as planets, they move. It impacts us because, again, we're in a solar system. That's the extension of our ecosystem beyond our planet. And the divinity within us is the fact that everything is connected and everything is part of this beautiful, intricate tapestry of divinity that we're experiencing in this particular realm. So I would love for you to go ahead and just kind of give people an introduction into like what's the terrain right now energetically.
Yeah, so I'm sure we all know we're in what's commonly known as Leo season. For the sake of the live, for the sake of the live, we're going to refer to her as Sekhmet season because that is the origin of her ancient name. We have Mercury and Mars in Aust, which is what we know as Virgo. Today, we currently have the moon in Gemini, Tahuti. Hey. And then we still have Jupiter and Taurus. So the planets that move the fastest are Mercury and Mars, and the moon, of course. The moon switches every 2.5 days. So for the sake of talking about what shifted since our last live, we're going to specifically hone in on Mercury and Mars because they're doing this dance together in Aust, which I said before is Virgo. And Mercury's at home in Virgo. Mercury's at home in 2 signs, Virgo and Gemini, Aust and Tahuti. So she's happy here. In Virgo, she is mutable earth, or Mercury has an fluid energy to it. So we don't necessarily apply a gender to Mercury because we're talking about the mental realm. But I'm saying she just for the sake of talking about Aust because I think that Virgo is a very feminine energy. So right now she's in Mercury. So essentially Mercury is how, when we're talking about transits, is how the collective facilitates the energy and its expression based off of the types of experiences we're all individually having, but also how we experience that as a whole based off of the energy of the sign. So right now Mercury is in Virgo. So Mercury is how we facilitate thought and it's how we absorb information. So it's like our antennas, and you can literally see that on the glyph of Mercury. It has the 2 antennas on the top, which is the only thing that makes it different from Venus. So Venus looks like a mirror without the antennas, and Mercury also looks like a mirror, but it has the antennas. So Mercury is how we receive downloads in order for us to derive perceptions, and it's how we go about communicating those perceptions. And in Virgo, we're comfortable here, or Mercury gets to do what she wants to do or what he wants to do because Virgo is interested in analyzing. So Virgo is mutable earth. So I think in like our first episode or the second episode, we talked about the modalities and we spoke a little bit about elements. So when I say mutable earth, mutable is an energy that wants to combine with something else in order to get to its root. So mutable brings change, or to get to its
Adaptable.
mission. Adaptable, yes. So it wants to bring change. So whenever we're in the mutable energies, we're going from one thing to another. And in Virgo, it's earth. It wants to build something. It wants to create something tangible, and it wants to see its transformation, or it wants to see the results of what it's changing. So it does that through its connections with other people, or the way that it communicates with other people. So that's what makes Virgo an analytical sign. Because when we're talking about the details in the earth element, that is life. You know, we look around. When we're on the earth, there's details in everything. You hear a whole bunch of things, you see a whole bunch of things, you sense a whole bunch of things, you interact with a whole bunch of things. These are all details that are making up our sense, and our sense is how we derive perception. So when Mercury is in Virgo, we're able to do that with more ease because she's comfortable there. And with Mars there as well, now that's influencing our actions. So Mercury and Mars are in reception to each other right now when they're in the same sign. So our thought patterns and our thought frequencies and what does best for us to implement Mercury in a way that's satisfying for the cosmic nature is also in alignment with Mars, which is the way that we exert and assert ourselves and how we obtain our desires and how we go about being desirable. So it's in the energy of Virgo right now.
Yes. So the way I look at it, all right, I see. So Mars is Heru, right? So we're talking about the warrior spirit, right? The victor, the one who wins, right? Energetically. That's what we're talking about. So you said antenna. I always think of horns because I think of Mars.
Mm.
Mars is like our fight, you know? It's the way that we assert ourselves, the way that we move through the world and, you know, exert our will essentially in the world. And then Tehuti, as we said, because Mercury is the energy of Tehuti. And Tehuti is our intellect, our mind. It's air energy. It's very analytical, as you said. And I see them together in Aust, right? Virgo, as like they're tag teaming because one, the energies move fast, but also they're both like, let's go, you know, like they're about it in their masculine energy. So they're active. So it's like they're ready to take it on. And the reason why we say the divinity is in the details is because that Ost energy, again, with that rulership, right? That influence of Tehuti, because Ast or Virgo is ruled by Tehuti, by Mercury, right? So think of Mercury, think of its position within our solar system. It's the closest to the sun. It's very fast moving. Its orbit is very significant in terms of impacting the way that's why our realm is very mental in a lot of ways. So when I think of that rulership and that influence on us, like obviously if you have that like big brother that's like super analytical, all in the mind, even though it's an earth sign, it's taking that mental energy, that intellect, and applying it practically. So us energy is always calculating, but it's also archetypal of the virgin, right? Because Virgo, virgin, right? So that archetype coming from the mythology, the ancient mythology of the first immaculate conception, right? So the fact that her husband is murdered and then she has to put the pieces of his body back together, she's mourning, but they haven't consummated their marriage, so she hasn't had any children by him. So when the resurrection of her husband takes place and she's able to, in the mythology, to give birth to her son Heru, right, which is what I said Mars is. So that's the intricate relationship I want you to think of with these energies. So we're talking about the son and the mother energy. So when I think of that energy, though, specifically, I just feel like it's very important to consider how Ast brings things down to earth. So what is that virgin archetype? It's about purification. It's about cleansing. It's about being the most intelligent possible. Obviously, in the most intelligent sense, you want to be in your optimal vital energy, right? So that purification and that cleansing and moving into purification is the movement of Ast, but Ast is also of service. So it's an energy that also moves us into service and into action, essentially, in these two energies. So I was thinking about within the mythology how there's a lot of layers to it. And I also want to encourage people who are watching this now on our channel. You're going to also see that there have been a couple of other live streams because the energy we're moving through in August is potent, right? We have the Lion's Gate portal, which is an astronomical occurrence that is happening. It's rooted in ancient Kemetic science because it's all about the rising of Sirius, right? The brightest star in our sky, which is actually our spiritual sun, the sun of our sun. It is what our ancestors said is our origin point. So when we talk about being cosmic beings, we're talking about where are we channeling from? So people are talking about aliens, and it's like, look in the mirror. You know, what are we? We are extraterrestrial. So in a sense, it's about seeing the extension of our consciousness beyond our physicality and our human form. But because Ast is an earth sign, it is really about the body and the earth and how we're connecting to nature and our own nature. So you can't deal with any energy without looking at the opposite axis. So the big thing about dealing with ancient African astrology is we have to take the African worldview on it. So it has to be seen within the context of the balance, right? Of the complementarity and looking at it holistically. So we went over this in one of our first episodes, just like simplifying that the zodiac, or the zodiac, the ecliptic of energy of the different constellations that we refer to and commonly know in the 12 zodiac signs, it's a 360-degree energy, right? So we all have all of these energies. All these energies are constantly present. When certain planets or luminaries, the sun most importantly, is shining within a certain area, it emphasizes that energy. But the energies are all always there. It's 360 degrees. And when we think of it, it's 12. So when you cut it in half, it's 6 and 6. So there's always an equal opposite energy that complements it. So I was wondering, Danny, can you talk about the complement to Virgo or Aust energy, which is Hatmi Hit, Pisces? Can you tell people about how this energy sphere balances itself and how we might be sensing that in terms of having Heru and Tehuti, right? Mars and Mercury in this sign right now.
Yes, so before I do that, I wanted to, because I was actually thinking about this today, the part that you were saying about the virgin, and obviously, like you were saying, departed from all of our conceptions about what that is and all of the ways in which we associate that with woman only. Aside from that, speaking of virginity through the lens of purification, like you were saying, it makes so much sense for Virgo to be represented through that archetype, or Aust to be represented through that archetype, because it's the last sign before we switch to the other half of the wheel, which you were talking about, the complements, which is the other half of the wheel is Libra through Pisces. And this is when we start to analyze ourselves through others. So we start to see ourselves through others. So Virgo is the last energy where we're looking at ourselves solely and we're building upon ourselves, which is why what you were saying about Virgo being the sign of service, it's a service oriented sign, but the point is to learn to serve the self. And in order to do that, you have to learn your own patterns, which is what I think is the association between Virgo and Mercury. Mercury is an energy that wants to organize and put things in its place so that it can work efficiently. And it's done differently through the energies of Tahuti and Ash, Gemini and Virgo, because Gemini is air, so it doesn't have the attached nature to the way that it wants to organize. So the thought frequencies can be differently. But for Virgo, like you said, Virgo processes, because it's earthly nature, through the physical body. So it has its attachment to form. So what it's organizing, it wants to see the results in its tangible, like intangible form. It wants to be able to look at what it's organized and see how it's efficiently helped what its aim was. Whereas in Gemini can do that all in the mental space and conduct that organization through its relationships without being attached to a specific result that it wants to desire. That it wants to bring forth. So with that in mind, thinking about the mutability, because Gemini and Virgo are a square for that reason. And a square is an aspect. When we're talking about aspects, we're just talking about the relationships between the planets or the energies or the signs, the archetypes. And when we say relationships, it's how they're communicating with each other based off of the angles that they're making. So Gemini and Virgo are a square because of the air and the earth. There's tension there because they have different aims. Like I said, Gemini doesn't need to attach to the organization that it brings. Virgo does attach to the organization that it brings to make sure that it carries out the result that it wants to see. So when we're talking about Virgo, now we look at the other side of that. What were you going to say?
No, I was just thinking about that controlling archetype, like, because people see Virgo energy as being very controlling. And that's what the way you just described it is exactly why, because it's like it
Yeah,
wants to
it's
see the
very
result in a
hands-on.
particular way.
Yeah, it's very hands-on. Which is what makes Virgos. I mean, when we're talking about Virgos, we're talking about Michael Jackson, we're talking about like legends, we're talking about people who know how to specifically curate exactly. It's like nothing goes missed. And that's like, okay, so when we think about the signs, the perfect way I like to think about it is that each sign before the one we're talking about is birthing the next. So Virgo comes out of Leo. So Leo's a very creative, fertile, playful energy. It wants to bring birth to something. It's in association with the archetype of children, creativity. So Virgo sees Leo and sees everything that was left a mess, essentially. So I feel like all that the sign previous to the one that we're looking at sees, it wants to self-correct through its energy. So Virgo embodies all of those Leo energies, but now it wants to make sure it does it efficiently. It's not fire now, where it's about the spark and the initial passion and the way that you personally feel and the heart-centeredness. It's taking that and amplifying it by making sure that the desired results are created through looking at what didn't work the first time or looking at what needs to be improved upon. So with that being said, had me hit Pisces being on the other side of that, the way that I think to ground this information is to look at the actual planets and what they're doing in each of the energies. So Venus is a fall in Virgo in Aust. And when we say fall, we're just talking about the positioning of the planets. So Venus literally is
When you say
below the
fall, you're referring to autumn
yes.
season.
Yes.
Okay, so before you zoom in, right? Because now you're getting you're getting Aust on us, you're getting Virgo on
Yeah.
us. You're about to zoom in. Before you zoom in, I want to make sure that everyone grasps the importance of what you just said, because a lot of people like it's easy to listen to the astrology, but or even any of it, the stuff with the moon and all the things. Like a lot of people just like, oh, they hear it and they say it, but they don't really get it, right? Like they really don't connect to it. I really want y'all to really listen to what she just said about the progression of energy. Like I said, it's 360 degrees. So all the energy always exists, but it goes through a cycle and it moves from the different modalities that we said, right? The mutable, the fixed, and the cardinal signs. And then it also moves through the different elements: air, water, fire, earth. So it's very important to think about what she just described as far as Sekhmet energy, that Leo energy coming from the fire energy. How does Virgo or Ast take the baton from Sekhmet, from Leo, and move it forward into earth energy, bring the fire down to earth? So all that active energy, that integrity, the heart space getting activated, you following your heart and being guided towards your heart when the sun, which is the ruler of Sekhmet, of the lioness, the Leo energy. So now we're moving with that passion when we move into the next energy, right? Because before Mercury and Mars, or Tehuti and Heru, were in Virgo, Ast, they were first in Leo, Sekhmet. So it's very important to recognize that. So I just wanted to make sure to like just water your wisdom there, because that's very important for people to recognize. Like the energy is like each energy, each constellation is passing the baton to the next energy. So the area of our life that is focused on and that's emphasized by that particular energy emphasis, it moves through that cycle. So it's going from fire to earth. So now you can go ahead and zoom in on Venus, right? Because we're talking about that's Heteru energy, and Venus being in Sekhmet in Leo.
So Venus is a fall in Virgo, right? Because of the natural progressions of the sign. So by the time Venus expresses itself in Virgo, it's burnt out essentially. So Venus is the energy of appreciation, value, receptivity, exchange, love, compassion, all the things that allow us to connect with each other, allow us to appreciate the beauty in things, art. It's a fall in Virgo. So if you have the position of Venus in Virgo, what that means is that the way that Venus naturally likes to express itself, it's further away from your expression because you use the energies of Virgo to express your Venus. So looking at the archetype of the energy, it makes sense when we're talking about Pisces being its polarized sign because Venus is exalted in Pisces. So Venus feels extra more comfortable to express its energy in Pisces because
Can you
Pisces.
explain why that is? Because I want to make sure that people are orienting themselves in the circle, right? In the 360-degree, in the pie, right? For them to recognize when something is exalted, when an energy is actually supported, or when it's kind of like really far away from its home. So it's like it can be in its detriment. That's the word that we use in astrology. But it being in its detriment
Right.
is it being the furthest away from its home. Can you
Mm-hmm.
just elaborate on that a little bit more in a simplified way so that we make sure that people grasp that? Because these are elements that I feel like are a little more advanced. So I just want to make sure that people actually can practically get what it means.
Well, I feel like even the word that you just used, practical, right? When we're talking about what we were just saying about Virgo, Virgo wants to analyze, right? It needs its thoughts to come to some practical conclusion to act on to breed a result. When we're speaking about the energy of love, practicality is not always the first way that it expresses itself, right? Love is not always this logical thing that we can organize in order to make sense of, to then make a decision through. So when we're speaking about the energy of Pisces, why Venus is exalted, Pisces is an imaginative energy because of its rulership being Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter is about belief, faith, it's about philosophy. It's about, yeah, it's expansive, it's big. It wants to start off with the big picture and then boil down to the details to support that. Whereas Neptune is about all the things that you can't necessarily see. It's the unseen. It's our imagination. It's how we come into creativity. It's how we merge. It's how we discover oneness. It's the energy of all that connects everything. It's that full cosmic nature. So Venus is exalted there because that's where we discover love. That's where we discover universal love. That's when we discover that love is not attachment, that love has no form, that love expresses itself in all different ways, that we are love ourselves and that it's not really about another person. In Pisces, we've reached the end. So we reached the end of the zodiac cycle. So we've learned from every sign all of these different love languages to now have this idea of love that can be seen in all different 12 different ways for us to just discover that it's this one existence. But Virgo is not looking at it as one. Virgo is looking at it as all of the pieces. So whereas Pisces is zoomed out and it's looking at love as this experience, and I'm not talking about people. I'm not saying that Virgos don't know love, just to make that very clear. I'm saying that when the energy expresses itself, the way that it naturally facilitates, the way that a Virgo expresses or receives love is in its fall as far as where Venus is comfortable. Because Virgo wants to look at the pieces that create the whole and wants to analyze all of those pieces and dissect them and clean them out and take out what doesn't work and put in what does work. When it's like, if we're talking about Venus in the sense of exchange, one-on-one connection, it's difficult to do that to a person and for them to receive that as love.
Yeah, I think that the energy itself is also one that can be like, because it's materially oriented.
Right.
Remember that all of the energies operate on a spectrum, right? So you can have these energies overemphasized or underemphasized, and then you can have them in their centered or balanced equilibrium, right? So there are expressions, like unhealthy expressions on both extremes, right? It depends on the circumstances and the situations, like what's appropriate, right? You know, sometimes you have to be in a state of urgency. Sometimes you have to have a lot of patience. It depends on the context of the situation. So I wanted to say that about Aust energy or Virgo energy, because it can be materialistic, but the way it's supposed to be materially oriented in its nature is in service, so that it doesn't get so selfish, right? Because you're also moving through that Sekhmet energy. Leo can be very self-centered. So it also depends on where and how we're accessing that energy of how we see ourselves, how we show up, how we radiate our energy, essentially, right? And that is determined on where we are within ourselves, within our hearts. Are we having an authentic expression of ourselves? So again, it's that continuum of energy to take into consideration, because it's an expression of however you're continuing to move through. So it's important with all these energies, right? Even whether you are Virgo or not, right? You have Aust in your chart, you have a planet there. It doesn't matter within the scope of the energy. We all have the energy in us, right? Because it's universal energy. They're just natural forces. So that's important for people to recognize, because I think also the aspect of like looking at the parts and the pieces, sometimes we have a hard time balancing it with the other side, which is like seeing the big picture. So usually we have those full moons to balance the energy, because when the sun is in a particular sign emphasizing it, you have that opposite side. So I'm wondering, can you speak on what energies do we have? Because when the moon and the full moon is illuminating the opposite side of the spectrum, right? Because that's how we have that full illumination. It's that radiance and that light from the sun that's reflected onto the moon. So it's important for us to have those full moons to then put emphasis and illuminate the opposite side of the spectrum to keep us balanced. So now that we're not looking at the sun energy in Virgo, we're looking at Mars and we're looking at Mercury. So we're looking at Tehuti and we're looking at Heru. So when we look at these two energy signatures, how are they being balanced right now with the opposite end of the spectrum, like the big picture perspective, the spiritual perspective? Because also Hatmi Hit, right? It's the glyph or the symbol of Hatmi Hit of Pisces is the fish. And we think about deep waters, right? It's a water sign as well, but it's very expansive, right? We don't even know how deep the ocean goes. There's certain parts of the ocean that's so deep that they can't even explore. So that's the energy and the depth of Pisces, that Hatmi Hit energy. It's very expansive. Like you said, it's where everything gets rendered energetically. So because everything's getting rendered, it's going through this consolidation process where everything is coming together. You're seeing it whole, but in order for that like compression to happen and that integration to happen, other things get shed too. So it's like this filtering process, because then from there it goes, the cycle begins again, right? So nothing really ends. It's a new beginning. And I was just looking at this quote about star systems and how the star is only born from the implosion, right? So the death is what creates a new star. So thinking of that energetically as well is something to think about, because it's really just a cycle. And that's what that Pisces energy wants you to see, is that there really is no separation, right? There is no ending. There's just another beginning. So it's all whole. But then Virgo wants to look at it, and it's like, no, we have to look at what happened before and what we're letting go of. And we got to look at the details, and we got to look at what's next. And we got to, right? It wants to take the microscope to it, right? And magnify and really see what's going on in those details. And that's why right now, if we want to align energetically and be supported by this energy, we want to pay attention to the details. But again, I think it's important for us to also know what's going on the opposite side, because we need to know where to engage and how the energy is supporting us to see also the big picture.
You just made me think about because you were talking about how Virgo is materialistic. And when you say materialistic, I'm thinking just the expression of earth, not like the greed or the gluttony of materialism, but more in the sense of like we were saying, that sense perception, like things needing to be tangible. So looking at how in our bodies, Virgo rules the digestive system, the gut, the spleen, all of the things that filter out or filter in nutrients and let go of what is not nutrient for our bodies. And how essentially that's what Virgo wants to do. It wants to do alchemy. It wants to take something from one form and make it its best through its own process. That's the way that Virgo approaches. So if we're talking about the other side, if Mercury is in Virgo and Mars is in Virgo, the complementary energies are Venus and Jupiter. So Venus right now is in Sekhmet in Leo retrograde. I think we spoke about that the last live. And then we have Jupiter in Taurus, happy still, or happy still. So Jupiter in Taurus is a very luxurious energy. It's when we speak of Jupiter, it's what are we expanding on? We're expanding upon our resources right now. We're expanding upon our value. So there's a level of gratitude that comes as a lesson to that, because although we may all have the desire to expand, with Mercury and Mars in Virgo, we have to look at what tools we have to expand upon. So really, Jupiter is grounding us in making us look at the current resources we have, but realizing that those things are internal and that there is a certain filtration process that happens before you reach this level of abundance that Taurus desires. And I think Virgo knows how to do that by extracting what is the obstacle, and that is identified through seeing the pattern of what has gotten, I don't want to say what has gotten in the way, but what has been like the, what's the saying, like the fork in the road prevalently,
Like
and
kind of
notice,
like obstacles.
yeah, but like noticing how that's happened over time at a gut level and being able to identify that through feeling, because it is still balanced by water. So earth signs are emotional. It's just that they like to emotionally manage. Like the point is to be able to build materially. That's their first instinct. So they can be reacting emotionally, but it doesn't get expressed outwardly, as where a water sign, their initial, their forefront intention is to connect emotionally, and from
Yeah.
there they will build.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So shout out to Nikki. That's my sister. That's my big sister. So she's a Virgo woman that is working on being of service to myself for once. And that is great. The other thing is, what we can do is analyze another interesting energy, because I want us to get into the more personal aspect, because I think it really allows people to see how it practically aligns, and also the benefits of knowing your energy and knowing your star print, as I'm calling it. That's like my new thing I'm coining, is like the real like design that we have when we come in, based on where the stars are aligned when we're born. So for my sister Nikki, she's a Virgo sun. So the sun was in Virgo in Aust when she was born, but the moon was in Sekhmet in Leo when she was born. So it's interesting, because I also think about my rising sign, my ascendant. So the constellation that was on the eastern horizon when I was born was also Sekhmet. And for Danny, the sun was in Sekhmet when she was born. And you also have another Sekhmet placement, right?
Venus.
Venus. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So very interesting. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, because I think about how her expression of Virgo and coming into like being of service to herself and seeing herself. So it's like she's balancing herself within the access.
What is
How
her
does that,
rising sign?
I don't remember. Do you remember your rising sign, Nikki? If you do, can you put it in the chat?
Yeah, because I think if we're ever talking about the star print, like you said, like with your rising being in Sekhmet, now we know that you have Aust in the second house. right? So we all, like you were saying, have Virgo somewhere. And that is where we apply our Virgo energy through the lens of the archetype of the house that it lives in. So she's a Virgo sun. So a lot of her concentrated energy, the way that she takes actions and what her values are built upon, are filtered through the archetype of Virgo, which is building stability amongst other people or creating change by seeking stability or not initiating, but yeah, building with other people. That's what Virgo wants to do. Um, but the house that is in is going to be the area of life in which she does that in. So we all have Virgo in a house. So for me, I have Virgo in the 12th house, which is a house of endings, the house of the subconscious, the house of merging, that
It's
oneness
the
that we
house
were
of
talking about,
Pisces.
the house of Pisces. Yes.
The
So
opposite.
all of mine are opposite because I have Libra in the first house. So for me, the ways that I filter, the where I find patterns, where I like to build stability is in my spirituality, in the places that dissolve my identity, in the places that I merge with other people, or where I discover what is hidden from me. That's where I apply my Virgo energy. So people may not see my Virgo energy. It may be apparent because I have Mercury on my midhaven. So it's like the way that I move throughout the world is with the Mercury energy. But as far as the way that I access Virgo, it's not seen. It's not at the forefront of my personality. Now, let's say someone has a Virgo rising, they have Virgo in the first house. The way that they identify themselves and the way that they go about personally asserting their identity out in the world and the way that they carve their perspective or their perception is going to be through the lens of Virgo. So they're going to initiate who they are in the world by letting people know what it is they would like to build, but also by creating routines around how it is they can do that. And Virgo is an energy that wants a routine. It wants a repetition. That goes back to the Mercury. Mercury is all about repetition because that's how we learn, by repeating things to ourselves. But Virgo is doing that through action, whereas Gemini can keep that in the realm of words or speech or associations. Yes, I forgot the initial question, but I do think
Well,
that.
it's interesting. She just sent me her chart.
Oh wow.
So looking at her star print, but it's interesting because I don't remember this being your chart. I feel like the last time we did it, your moon was in, I could have sworn her moon was in Leo, but this is saying her ascendant, her rising sign was in Leo.
Okay, y'all are the same.
Yeah, interesting, right? And my brother, my big brother too, is also a rising Leo second.
Wow, does your mom have Leo placements?
Huh?
Does your mom have Leo placements?
I actually don't know. I haven't done my mom's chart.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm gonna do that. That's a good thing to do right now during this Venus retrograde. I feel like that would be great to
Yeah.
get that. Yeah. So it's also interesting. I think it's important for us to think about the rest of the month because, first of all, August is jam packed. We have another full moon at the end of the month. We also have, like I said before, if you want to watch the Lionsgate live stream that I did, that really goes into detail in terms of the star system, the binary star system, Sirius. And as I said, it's the sun of our sun, how it's rising on the horizon into prominence in our sky. So its influence and the way that we're able to channel from that energy is very significant. That's directly associated with us, with Virgo energy. Now, in the mythology, remember the mythology is all based on the stars. So that's important for us to know about ancient African cosmology. It is rooted in the stars. So we've seen these energies and these archetypes as energies that we embody. Unfortunately, it's been interpreted through a European lens and given to us as if these are gods and goddesses, right? So people start seeing them as external things, as deities. But what they are is, like I said, it's a sacred science. So it's more so about seeing how these are natural forces and energies that exist within the universe and how they come around in cycles, right? As we move through our solar system. So there's also, when we have Sirius rising right now, we also have Orion's belt, right? Orion is the term that they've given us, but the ancient word for it is Asar, because Asar is the husband of Aust. So when they rise into prominence in our sky, they're rising together. So it's an energy of rebirth, of resurrection. It's a very powerful energy center, or energy signature. And I think it's also important, if you haven't watched the live stream we did last night, the balance of the sexes, which is the talk show, the professor and prophets and priestess, excuse me, the professor and priestess talk show. We did the second episode last night with Mama Regina, and we went in on Black August and why there's so many prominent just rebellions and just different acts of resistance that have happened for us as African people, particularly fighting for liberation in August. And then it's so funny because my sister also sent me that video of that brawl that happened in Montgomery. So that to me is like it is like literally the epitome of what I'm talking about energetically.
I actually think that's super pivotal because like a lot of people don't talk about this when they associate with Virgo for some reason, or Aust, but Aust like naturally wants to, it's the farmer. Like Taurus is the farmer, but Virgo is harvest season, literally. Like Virgo is when we see the fruits grow and we're able to see what crops are able to be sustained for nourishment and which ones need to be weeded out that are fucking up the garden. So I feel like Virgo loves in that way, and that's why Virgo is, it does create an energy within all of us that wants us to serve our people, which is where like that energy from Sekhmet comes, the life force. So like after your heart has been activated, now it's like in Leo we have all of these feelings and all of this passion about moving forward and making it clear what we want, and et cetera, all the things that fire comes with. It's a very, let's go. But then in Virgo, it's like we have to take that energy and make a plan, and we have to execute that plan beyond the means of what is possible. We have to make the plan real. And that's what Virgo wants to do. So I think that's why so much pops off in August, because the energy is supportive of making sure that you get the fruits that you deserve.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up that farmer aspect, because that's essentially like the foundation of the entire mythology. It's Ast and Asar are the first rulers, the first leaders of Kemet, right? Of what people know mainly or commonly know as ancient Egypt. They were the first leaders because they taught the people how to farm. So from their story, as they bring this knowledge of agriculture to the people, they're saying like we've come from the stars, right? Like we've come from the stars to teach how to farm and how to cultivate the land. And as the people begin to cultivate the land and farm and the agriculture grows, right, there begins to be surplus of food. So the people don't have to be hunters and gatherers and constantly move. So they begin to stay in the same place and settle. And then they're able to pay attention to the details, right? Because that's us energy. It's all about the details. So she starts observing the stars and seeing the patterns in nature and seeing the mathematics and everything and how things grow and analyzing that and creating the sciences that we have: mathematics, astronomy as we know it, astrology also, but architecture, right? Because you have to be able to stay in one place in order to build and construct on that place. So there's this huge expansion of energy, and it's not specifically in that northern region of Africa, because we have to remember that the Hapi Valley, the Nile Valley, that Nile River, the Hapi, flows from south to north. So it's coming from the interior of Africa and flowing up into the Mediterranean. So that culture was a culture that had already gone through millennia of development, because we're talking about the first peoples of the planet. So it's really essential to recognize the connection to nature, right? Because when we say materialism, we're talking about earth energy. It can be materialist in the expression of the degenerate cycle we're in right now, where people are very disconnected from nature. But what Aust actually wants to do, and where Aust actually reigns supreme, is in nature, right? Is being in alignment with nature. Like you said, it wants that harvest, it wants to see the results. So it's going to work to do that. And it's going to analyze and make sure, almost to a fault sometimes, right? It's going to make sure it's like almost obsessively to a degree. So it's important to balance the energy. Like we said, always zoom out, go to that Pisces energy, that happy hit, dive into the waters, release yourself into the ocean, right? Because remember, earth energy, our planet, has a lot of water on it, right? Water is the primordial energy of the planet. So that water is supportive of Aust energy. But remember, we're dealing with divine feminine forces. So they're feminine, they're receptive in their nature. So it's also really supportive to align with the energy in our intuition, in our emotionality, in being more receptive, right? Making more time to rest and be still, so that the mind isn't overactivated. The mind doesn't become anxious, because that anxiety is really your spirit calling you in to yourself, right? So instead of going more outward, you need to go inward. So I think that's one of the practical ways to really engage with this energy, because like we said, Heru, which is Mars, Mars wants to fight. And remember, that's his mom's. So this is where the discipline piece comes in, because we're talking about also the rise of Sirius and how our sun being stimulated by its sun, which is Aust, that Virgo energy is associated with this energy signature. We're talking about what they call the dog star, right? Canis Major. So the binary star system of Sirius is in the constellation of Canis Major, the dog star. And in the mythology of our ancestors, the dog or the jackal is known as Anpu. And Anpu is the principle of discernment, right? Being able to have good judgment. We all know with dogs, it's their nature and the behavior of the dog that symbolized is that keen sense of smell, having good judgment. And the jackal will literally kill its prey, and it has to bury it and come back, because it has to decay to a certain degree in order for it to actually be able to digest it. So it's actually going to have to come back and sniff when it's the perfect amount of decay before it digs it up and actually eats it, right? So that discernment is patience as well, right? Because you can't just kill and eat, right? So that energy is very supportive of Aust, because Anpu was seen as Ast's, best friend, right? And it's funny because we get that in American culture. It's like the dog is man's best friend, but really in ancient African culture, the dog is woman's best friend. So I think that's an interesting dynamic to think about. So you can use this energy, the force of Anpu, right? The natural energy of discernment, good judgment, taking your time, paying attention to the details, sniffing things out. And then you use the energy of Heru, Mars, which is ready to fight, but Heru wants to win. So Heru is the disciplined warrior. You're talking about the one that gets up at 4 a.m. every day and is climbing up all those stairs and working out and making sure that the strength is up and he's ready for war, right? So we're dealing with both of those energies. So discipline and discernment are going to be keys to making sure that you activate this energy in a way that's going to thrust you forward in this new beginning that you're experiencing, because we're all going into new beginning. We already talked about this in the last episode we did 2 Wednesdays ago, the one about the nodes shifting into Amun, Aries, which is the first sign in the zodiac. So now that means all of us are being directed into a new stage of life, a new journey. But it might get uncomfortable first before we go there, because remember, Venus is retrograde. Mercury is about to go retrograde, right? So it's going to have that optical illusion where it looks like it's moving backwards. So I always say it's a slingshot effect. It's going back to shoot you forward, right? So you're going to have that acceleration going forward. But first, you got to make sure you really got all that, right? Got all those details. That's because we're talking about Mercury or Tehuti in Virgo. So you're coming back to make sure you got all those details. So next strong, sometime, I think, is it on the 16th? No, the 23rd. 23rd is when Mercury is going retrograde in Virgo. So the energy is going to kind of pull back and retract. And depending on your star print and what your energy signature is in your natal chart and when you were born, it depends how you feel that energy, because everybody doesn't necessarily feel that impact of Mercury retrograde strongly. I really do because my Mercury and my Sun are both in Gemini, in Tehuti. So I usually just surrender entirely to Mercury retrograde. Like, I'm doing my reflection work, I'm taking a lot of time to meditate, I'm journaling double time, like, just to make sure that I am in alignment with the energy. I'm giving myself plenty of time and space when I travel. I'm taking great care with my communications. That's going to be a big thing. So you want to talk about how this energy is going to express itself during Mercury retrograde?
Yes, bring me back there. But there was one part of the story, the cosmology of Aust and Apu, that I thought was really necessary to emphasize, which was that they got their knowledge of farming from the stars. So when we're talking about the Virgo energy and it being overemphasized, there's an element to Virgo that gets addicted to the routines that have worked. And so with the access of Virgo and Pisces, it's like, yeah, we know this is the access of addiction. Pisces can get addicted to things that helps to dissolve into the oneness that it wants to experience because it doesn't feel that connection on the earth. Virgo will get addicted to things because it feels like it works already for what it has synthesized is what breeds the result that's desired. So Virgos can get addicted to people that they've synthesized into their routine, habits, ways of seeing, thought patterns, all of the things, because again, Mercury likes repetition. So once that repetition has been solidified and it has become something that has breeded results, the earth, the Virgo will become attached to it in a way where it's hard to dissolve out of. And I think what helps us dissolve out of the routines and the patterns that no longer help us with the new people that we're becoming when we're cycling through these moments of death, where we have to literally leave parts of ourselves that no longer desire to exist with where we're resonating at the moment, having the big picture in mind of who we were always meant to be is very necessary in starting with, rather than starting with a plan. Because when you create all of these details about how you're going to arrive at this destination, then you're not able to actually notice the subtle shifts that are happening in your day to day that are leading you somewhere else that you can't actually picture yet. So there's a level of like imagination necessary in order to really fertilize the Aust energy in the way that it wants to be expressed in its healthiest expression, which is like knowing the magnitude of what you can create and like actually seeing it in this full and allowing the details to come to you there in the imagination rather than focusing on the earth, like the day to day, the actual actions, the routines. Because when you get addicted to those, now you are overworking. And there's that workaholic element to Virgo too, where it's like if Virgo is not working, they don't feel worthy because again, Venus is a fall. So the way that they love is about the way that they can help. So that's going to create that mental perception of like, I have to be doing in order to receive love or experience love. And if you have that big picture, then you can ground yourself in the fact that rest is also productive because that's a part of the big picture too. Like you have to have enough energy in order to actually allow yourself to receive what that picture is. So with that in mind, I feel like Mercury retrograde is definitely going to take us there. It's going to show us how all of the stuff that we be doing, all of the extra mental functionings, all of the extra thoughts, all of the extra figuring things out and creating resolution, how all of it is in our heads. I think this Mercury retrograde is going to really slow us down in a way where we recognize that we're not in control in the way that we think we are. We have power and sovereignty in the way that we see ourselves, in the way that we engage with others, and how much energy we pour into anything. But there's I'm thinking about like when Virgo slows down, it's able to come into its body in entirety rather than solely operating from the functioning of the mind. Because we know we're not all of our thoughts. Like, we're absorbent beings, and our thoughts are affected by the frequencies that we're surrounded by. So with this retrograde, it's like learning to respond to the experience rather than just here, I think.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting though, because I think about how Aust energy, Virgo energy is mutable, but how it does attach itself. And like what you're saying, like it's the opportunity with it going retrograde and it's kind of going backwards. It's like be clear on the details, right? Because the mind is very stimulated. So it's important to just honor the nature of the energy. Don't try to resist it, right? You honor the nature of the energy. You do work out, you do take care of your body, you do take time to be with your body, you do massage yourself, you do all the things, the best ways you can care for your material physical reality and world. Do that. Pour into yourself in that way. This is a great time for that because Venus is also retrograde, right? Heteru is the energy of magnetism, attraction, right? It's the divine feminine. That's why they say it's beauty and love, because it's magnetism and attraction. But think about it scientifically. Remember, we're trying to get away from the limitation of thinking of it linearly, and we're trying to think of it expansively, right? So we're talking about the energy of attracting and magnetizing what it is that you desire, right? Coming back into that Leo energy, because it is lust, it is desire, it is all of that. So all of these energies are stimulated right now. That's why it's like this big energy and it's intense. So it's important to lean into those things and honor them and allow those things to be the things that support you in getting the clarity that Virgo Mercury wants, right? So Ast wants to feel comfortable, but Tehuti is going to support us. So you want to use your intellect and you want to use your mind to support you in taking better care of yourself and slowing down and shaking certain shit off you that you don't need so you can make space for things. Because as you were speaking, I was just processing it in my own reality. I'm like, yeah, I just need to let certain shit go. And it's not that I just need to let it go, like, because I can easily just put certain things down. But what I actually need to do is let go of the thoughts that attach me to the thing. And I want to actually give an example because this is interesting. When we first got on the live stream and you were like, oh, how are you doing? I was like, yeah, I was like, well, there's some things I could talk about, but it's not so much that I can unpack right now, right before we go live. So it's interesting because what had happened was, right, so I have my beautiful guitar here, Ra, and I got this guitar when I was in Mexico, and I love her. I'm not gonna give her too much love because y'all ain't gonna give her evil eye. But I got this new guitar. It's electroacoustic. It has actual, like, it's a real deal guitar. The first guitar that I had that I bought here was still here. And that guitar has nylon strings, so it's easier to play on that guitar. And I love the way it sounds. And it's easier to play. Like, it's just easier. It doesn't hurt your fingers. It's like, it was like my starter guitar, and I was really attached to it. So my cousin came over and she was like, oh, can I play the guitar or whatever? But she's been like throwing these little hints of like, oh, her guitar is broken and she doesn't have a guitar, but she's not asking me for my guitar outright. But I could tell that she knows I got a new guitar. but I don't really want to give her my old guitar because I still like to play that old guitar sometimes. I've honestly been playing the old guitar more than I've been playing the new guitar. So I was just like, as you were talking and processing it all, like it was kind of annoying to me energetically because like you said, we don't have our minds and our thoughts depending on our sensitivity, right? And what frequency we're operating on, we're going to sense all of that. You like, that's why for me at this point, I'm like reading people's minds because no one's thoughts are their own. It's in the field. So if it's there, it's there. So I could sense what she's putting down without saying it. And I'm just like, okay, you want to go with the guitar? And then like she went with the guitar. I didn't give her the guitar yet, but I was just processing that. And it was like something that was heavy on me right before we started the live stream. Because I'm like, I do not want to give her my guitar. Like I genuinely am attached to the guitar, even though it's like, okay, you got a guitar right here. And I know it's more beautiful. Look at it. It's like, it's a better guitar, but it's harder to play. Like quite literally, like the new thing that we're moving into is going to take more discipline. It's going to take more work. It's harder, right? But we're also stronger and we can handle it. And if we want to keep growing, we have to move into those more difficult spaces. The discomfort is going to go away as we grow and stretch and start to fill up that space. So I feel like that was an important thing to just express that I'm going through, because it felt in like literally the energy of like, okay, just let it go. You're on to the next. It's like a new stage, a new platform. As long as you have that old guitar, you're going to still start be playing that old guitar instead of strengthening your fingers even more and getting more in tune with how to play the new guitar. So I just want people to take that into consideration as we move into retrograde. What are those things? Look at the details, right? Because the divinity is in the details. Look at the details of the things that are still around, that are still taking up space, that you need to make space for this next 18-month cycle, that the lunar nodes have now shifted into this new expression of energy. So that's a really great prompt with your journaling. I think we already talked about fitness, health, taking care of your body. Lavender, yes.
Lavender, yes. Virgos, all people who have an emphasis of Virgo, lavender is such an essential tool to slow down the mind. So that was such a good example. It just made me think about so much. But I think that what you were just describing is literally the essence of the Virgo struggle, which is like being able to adopt a new model based off of the level up. It's like wanting things to stay the same because you're afraid of mess. But really, you trying to keep things the same is what's messy. So being able to slow your thoughts down enough to catch.
I can't put those in the back because that right there. Say that one more time.
Literally, I forgot what I said. I hate when that happens. But
it doesn't want the mess, but holding on to that is actually what's messy.
It's actually what's messy, yes, because you're literally fighting your own growth, your own decay. Like you're resisting your own death. And at this point, you're creating thought forms to support keeping things the same. And I don't even think
support. Are you going to be able to hold that thought? Because you just put me onto something like real clear, that came through real clear as you said that. Because remember, I said Anpu is Ast's best friend, right? The jackal is her best friend. So it's interesting because in the mythology, the jackal Anpu, which most people, I'm sure it's one of those depictions from ancient Kemet that most people are familiar with, because you see the human form with the mask of the jackal, of the dog. And it's usually seen at the mortuary scenes in the funerary rites, because it literally is the embalmer. It takes the dead and it wraps it up and processes it and allows it to go through that whole process to be buried, right? Put that shit in the tomb. So it's that, like, think about it that way. I don't think we're necessarily, it's not an energy where you just want to throw things out that quick. That's something that I'm learning, right? it's the energy of, okay, it's dead, and let's take out the organs, let's bandage it, let's make a tomb, let's put all its favorite things in there. Like, it's that. It's like, I know it's not gonna be easy to let that thing go. So go ahead and have a whole funeral for the thing that you gotta let go. Yeah.
Literally. And that's why I say lavender, because it just supports easing into your nervous system, adjusting to the change, because really that's the source of the attachment. Like, our nervous system conducts our comfortability. And if you're comfortable in chaos or a mess, then you're going to keep going towards it. So the lavender gives you the chance to really like synthesize the subtle shifts within you that now desires something different, and gives you the space to facilitate the funeral so that you can see yourself without it.
I want to shout out Nyasha. Welcome, sis. So Nyasha says greetings, and she says we look beautiful and pretty. Thank you. We are your reflection. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we close out? If you have any burning questions at the end, those of you who are here live, go ahead and put that into the chat, because we're going to begin to wrap up today's stream. So if you have any questions or comments that you want us to address, put that in right now. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And
I wanted to say one thing about Hat Me Hit Pisces being Virgo's complement. Pisces rules the immune system. So Virgo season is where people start getting sick again and things like that. We do see like the COVIDs coming back around for people. So I just think developing practices that make you safe in your health, so that there's not like rampant mental functioning about what could be going wrong with your body, because that creates an open door. Yeah, prevention. I think that's the essence of Virgo too, just like doing what needs to be done for you to be in the state to know that you're good. Like, you don't need to be addicted to the routines. You can allow for change and fluidity, but there are certain things that we're addicted to that aren't conducive to our health. We need to shift that energy into being like extremely receptive to the routines that sustain our health. So prevention is a great thing to have.
Coming back to that purification, that purity, right? Because when we think about that virgin energy, it's an archetype. So that purification isn't necessarily like, it's like literally how there's the opposite archetype to Aust, which is Nebetet, which can be seen in the prostitute, right? So these archetypes are very significant. And for those of you who are familiar with the more Christian paradigm, this is literally, we're talking about the origins of Mary and Mary Magdalene, quite literally. So yeah, it's archetypal to say that like we're looking at the extreme or the embodiment of what those things are, but we all have both in us, right? So it's about not leaning too much into one particular thing. Like you said, you have to be mutable with this energy. So you have your rituals, you have your routines, but you have to be adaptable as well. And pay attention to the details, right?
And have fun. It's still Leo season.
And have fun. We didn't talk about perfectionism, because I think that that's also an aspect of it when we talked about the controlling element, because I think Virgos get a bad rep about being, perfectionists, and it's just an energy where it's like, right? It's a very mental energy. If you know and you paying attention to all the details, when shit's off, you're gonna see it. Right. So it's like, that little thing right there that nobody else sees, I see it.
Right.
So it can be annoying for some people, but the way we lean into that is actually use that to refine yourself, actually use that to make things better. Pay attention to the details and refine them. And honestly, I like to always express to people that my perspective of perfection is the fact that everything is perfect as it is. Now, despite whatever deformities or flaws there may be, there's the divine perfection within that, because we have to humble ourselves to the divine and know that everything is exactly as it should be. And it's also an embrace and an act of self-love, right? In terms of really pouring into the self, right? And being of service to yourself, you got to give yourself that grace and also see the divinity within yourself. Realize, literally realize, make it real, make your divinity real. It's going to require you to see that it's perfect exactly as it is. You don't need to change. You don't need no surgery. You don't need nothing you don't have. And learning to love that, that's the part that is really like what Aust really wants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody who's here with us live. And for those of you who stayed through for the raw play, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back. We're here every other Wednesday, excuse me, at 6 p.m. Eastern time live. So if you want to tune into our next chat, we'll be here. And if you are watching this live, also keep in mind Friday, we're going to have our detox panel on Burn Your Bra, Barbie. We're talking about the implications of white deities, modern white deities on Black people. So we're going to really extract a lot of what's going on right now in the narratives about feminism and gender and all that good stuff. So we'll be here again on Friday. So subscribe to the channel. If you want a reading with Danny, you can click the links in our bio, in the description, to find us on Coins and Caris, where you can book the services there. So see you soon. Hi, Venus.
Say hi.
Hi.
Yes.
All right.
Happy with
Have a
us.
beautiful night.
You too. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Neff. I love you. Peace.
Are you too? Power.